So our next speaker is Professor Musavi from the University of California, Los Angeles. He has excavated at the site of Pasargadae, as well as other sites in Iran, Turkey, and France. He's also the director of the Archaeological Gazetteer of Iran. I'm sorry, Professor Musavi. Please welcome him. And his talk is titled "The Achaemenids Between Tradition and Innovation, an Archaeological Perspective."
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank the organizers, Professor Rollinger and Professor Scheigan, for giving me a chance to talk about the Achaemenids once again. So the title of my talk is Tradition and Innovation, and I am more leaning towards innovation, and you'll see why. Continuity and change, tradition or innovation, like core and periphery, is one of those popular topics in archaeology almost everywhere in the world. And as archaeologists, whose focus is necessarily a small part of a large phenomenon, cultural change poses considerable challenges. Obviously, not every period of human history constantly outperforms the previous ones to produce a better one, and we have present-day examples. But I think that the long history of Iran is marked by a series of major changes. And for the Achaemenid period, I see more novelty. But I should mention two excellent publications, one by Dan Potts, the other by my former classmate and friend Javier Alvarez Moon. And they study carefully this continuity of tradition, or this persisting tradition from the previous periods all the way down into the Achaemenid, or even into the Sasanian period. So my talk is, in a way, is in the opposite direction. Let me begin with a quotation by Albert T. Olmsted, who opens up the first chapter of his History of the Persian Empire by writing, "When Cyrus entered Babylon in 539, the world was old. His taking of the old city was certainly the beginning of a new era." To respect my time, I'm going to concentrate on three areas where we notice obvious changes or breaks from the preceding periods. The first one is what I call the spatial dimension or novelty, the geography. The major and historically known political entities in Iran before the Persians were the Elamites and the Medes, and then, of course, the Neo-Babylonian kingdom. The Elamite kingdom, Elam was a federation of political entities. And a variety of ethnic components. So the Elamite kingdom's tendency was to swing between two major areas, the highland and the lowland, the Susiana. And the Elamite territory did not go beyond the western shores of the region, this area, up to the Tigris on the west side. And then on the east side, the extreme reach of the Elamite kingdom was the barren land that separates Fars, Persia, and Kerman, these areas. The late Pierre believed that the key to Elam's history was always in the hands of the mountain people, needed Susa, which was situated at the junction of the two antithetic worlds, the Iranian plateau and the plain of Mesopotamia. In the end, it took a Persian, Darius, to fulfill the ancient Elamites' dream. Susa's Achaemenid constructions testify to a successful fusion of highland and lowland cultures. So a Highlander conquered once and for all the ancient city of the lowland and made it his own capital city, or the capital of a much larger kingdom, an empire. This would have never crossed the mind of a Shutuk-Nahunti or a Shilhak in Shushinak. The New Babylonians seemed to be satisfied in what they had taken from the debris of the former Assyrian Empire. And as for the Medes, they essentially remained a mountainous polity with little interest in southern regions where the nascent power of the Persians was absorbing the Elamites or replacing the Elamites. I believe none of the two kingdoms, or the three previous kingdoms, ever ventured to create a larger realm that might later qualify as an empire. They didn't have the vision, they lacked the economic apparatus, the manpower, and the military machine. And aside from its political significance, ruling over a vast landmass between the Indus and the Mediterranean provided access for the Achaemenids to a variety of resources, such as technological means and raw materials, a glimpse of which is given in Darius's famous inscription from Susa, DSF. The second, related to the first one, is what I call the climatic dimension. We saw a similar chart this morning. I think that this is very à la mode these days. And the beginning of the Persian Empire coincided with a prosperous climate or climatic moment. This may also be interpreted as a cause of a change, but I think that this is still a change. Well, this chart is confusing, it's scary, but in reality, we are dealing with this bar, this area, as you can see, only. Several Paleolithic records from Southwest Asia indicate an increase in aridity and cold between 1200 and 900 BC. Mean annual temperatures dropped by up to 5 degrees Celsius, and winter precipitation decreased by 40% during this period. It had a significant negative impact on herders and farmers. This resulted in a general settlement, abandonment across almost all of Iran, with the exception of its northwestern region. Around 900 BC, the weather improved, allowing human settlement and intensive farming to return. This coincided with the mighty Iron Age empires of Iran and Southwest Asia, the new Assyrian Empire, for example. This rain-fed and irrigated agriculture was followed by a 130-year period of severe aridity that began around roughly 700 BC. And recovery started around 600 BC, and this is the rise of the Medes, the Medes at their apogee, and lasted until 500 BC. This is what you see here. It's a relaxation after, I would say, 700 or so. And we know that the experience of severe droughts and famine is reflected in Achaemenid inscriptions, where Darius prays, "May Ahura Mazda protect this country from the enemy army, from crop failure, famine, drought, and from the lie." The third is the material culture or culture dimension that the Achaemenids brought about. And here I will limit myself to mention architecture and its two appendings or appending aspects, sculpture and inscriptions, pottery and seals. Iran has a very long history or tradition, architectural tradition, with the main construction materials being mud brick, flexible, easily and cheaply made, and an excellent heat and cold-proof material, as long as it's regularly maintained. Having absorbed and used traditional architectural methods, the Achaemenids broke from the long tradition of building in brick by their large-scale use of stone, in contrast to the traditional materials of mud brick, burnt brick, and wood. Even the wood they used was far more superior than the one available to the Elamites, for example. In fact, the preceding kingdoms and dynasties built magnificent buildings made of brick, like this one, this beautiful 1400 BC town, Elamite town, the ziggurat of Chogazambil, or the famous temple in Nushijan. They're all built in mud brick. But then this was the introduction of a stone and its large-scale use that put the Achaemenids apart. Iran is rich in high-quality limestone and harder rocks, like granite, marble, and schist. But because of the beneficial uses, qualities of mud brick, and also transportation costs, stone was limited to temple foundations and key buildings, like temples, at least down to the 6th century BC. So the transition of change in the construction methods took place under Cyrus the Great, who brought stonemasons and builders from Asia Minor, Greeks of Asia, now part of his empire, and other conquered countries like Mesopotamia, between 546 and 539 BC. All those techniques of stone cutting, setting, joining, and other aspects in connection with stone architecture have been carefully studied by at least two brilliant scholars, and Britilia and Carl Nylander. The Achaemenids but elaborated, developed new forms of architecture. So now the forms are spacious, and the technological means of the time allowed Achaemenid builders to reach volumes that were inconceivable in previous periods. Like column halls, massive column halls built almost entirely in stone, like this one. This is one of the earliest Achaemenid column halls, Palace P at Pasargadae. But there are other ones, another photo of Palace P with my former teacher and mentor, the late Shahriar Ayad. And here is Philippe de Montebello, the former director of the Metropolitan Museum, paying a visit to the site of Pasargadae. It was under Darius that the new form, or at least this type of building, the column hall, reached its zenith. So Darius rebuilt Susa. He razed old Elamite buildings in ruin and built his royal apartments and this column hall. The Achaemenid constructions at Susa were in fact a successful marriage between the two architectural traditions. This Elamite, I would say even Mesopotamian tradition of building in brick, with three interior courtyards, all in brick, decorated with bricks, and then a tradition that came from the plateau, from the highland, the column hall. This is a purely Iranian form of building, and we have examples as early as 800 BC in central western Zagros. Given its technological innovation and impressive aspect, this Achaemenid column hall is the indication of a Persian presence, whether it is at Pasargadae or at Susa, at Hamadan, Brazjan, or even in the Caucasus. Of course, at Persepolis, almost everything is in stone, and on the terrace, you'll find a multitude of column hulls, including this magnificent Apadana, but also this jungle of columns, the Hall of 100 columns, that Herzfeld despised and disliked. I think that, this we can discuss. The concept of this large audience hall with 4 corners survived well into later periods. I can think of the Sasanian periods. They eliminated the columns, and these 4 corners or towers became 4 pillars, and everything was covered with a cupola or a dome. This is the plan of a charta. That's just an idea, if you're interested in continuity. Now, 2 appending elements, the sculpture and interior decoration, and the inscriptions. Sculpture is subordinate to architecture, and its meaning is only manifest when it's associated with buildings and monuments. This is not something apart. We have sculptures in round, but we don't have any monumental, anthropomorphic or human figures or representations in Achaemenid art, with the exception of the Egyptian statue of Darius found at Susa. As you see, these beautiful sculptured stairways, they're attached to the building. And another interesting characteristic of what we see is that the real image is universal and impersonal, while the figures of the empire's nations are carefully individualized or to impersonate their physical appearance, like this panel showing the delegation of Ethiopians at Persepolis. Same thing at Nakhsh Rustam. The sculpture is there because of the rock-cut tombs. Same thing as Susa with glazed bricks. Inscription. A monumental inscription in Achaemenid time is often meaningful in its archaeological context and the object or medium on which it is written or carved, whether it is at Pasargadae, Susa, or at Persepolis. The foundation plaques of the Apadana found by Friedrich Krefter during Herzfeld excavations, or even if it was found outside its original context, reused in another context, like this Daiva example, inscription of Xerxes, found at Pasargadae in 63, or the ones reused as a bench at Persepolis. Well, pottery, there's a tendency towards standardization, particularly in the empire's core region. So we know much better now the Achaemenid pottery, the famous carinated form, the Achaemenid ceramic, and we know that this is once again an Iranian, let's say West Iranian form that they took from the Zagros area. And here you see 2 examples, one that was found at Pasargadae by my colleague and friend, Mohamed Taghi Atai, and then a group of ceramics that we think represents probably the oldest specimen we have from the Achaemenid period in our own excavations at Pasargadae in 2016. And once again, thanks to recent excavations in Fars, we know that this pottery gradually replaced the Elamite pottery, the so-called Shogatei Muran type, in the region of Persepolis and Pasargadae. Glyptic, in brief, a break from the previous tradition of representing static scenes by introducing movement. And this is a novelty in the Achaemenid period, as you can see on the Acropole tablets, riders, or this very famous, celebrated seal of Courage, the Anchenite, found at Persepolis. So the personified or anthropomorphic deities are represented by scenes of worship, exaltation of divine symbols, or simply the real hero, fire, earth, etc. This appears as early as the first half of the 6th century BC with these Acropole group of tablets found at Susa, tentatively dated between 580 and 570 BC. To talk about the continuity after the fall of the Achaemenids would take another maybe conference or paper. And I would like to close this presentation with a quote from Roman Gershman in his world-renowned book, L'Iran des origines à l'Islam. The Achaemenians conceived Iran as a state and turned that concept into a reality. Its survival, no less than its independence, was the legacy they bequeathed to posterity. And I thank you very much.